Chapter 3, Part 3. Cedrion tenses, unfolding his arms. The movement surprises Inyana, as the Yazata has been completely still for hours. "What is it?" Inyana whispers. "Has something happened?" "I realize now that a new rule will need added to the tournament," he says, grinding his teeth in anger. "A rule?" This catches Kazura's interest. "Was the lack of rules not a key point?" "Those selfish fools will ruin everything that I have set up," Cedrion growls, mostly to himself. "If their power was not needed, I would eliminate them myself." "Eliminate who?" Inyana asks. "The Devilnay," Cedrion growls, "rebellious to their very core. I specifically told them not to enter the tournament. In return, we allowed them to use this island as a staging area for their side project." "We knew yesterday that 3 had entered," Kazura says. "I did not think that it would be a problem. Are they really that powerful? Will no one else stand a chance at defeating them?" "As long as a certain technique is not utilized, they can be beaten." Inyana's memories flutter, recalling exactly which ability he's referring to. "Shamad," she whispers. Cedrion nods. "If we aren't able to block the use of that power, the Banu Casca will be stolen right from beneath us. While myself and Gadriel are barred from entering the shrine, the Devilnay dwell within the bodies of human beings, and can thus bypass its restrictions." "Would they be so bold?" Kazura asks. "Surely that would be expected to anger you. Why would they risk such retaliation?" "Like all devils, their arrogance outweighs their fighting ability. They must believe that together they can overpower me." "They can't, can they?" Kazura asks nervously. "Absolutely not. The power of each of the Devilnay was reduced to a splinter of what it was before their uprising. Even a low-class Seraphim warrior would defeat them one-on-one. Only the Knights of the Fly were strong enough that, even reduced, their power still exceeded the majority of the non-officer-ranked Yazata." "But are not all 3 of the devils in the tournament Knights of the Fly?" Kazura asks, his voice rising. "The group Cerberus that contacted us, I specifically remember them mentioning that affiliation." "They are, but they are not anything for me to worry about. Few among my former brethren are aware of the fact that I kept my true potential hidden from even my superior officers. It was more useful for me to move about unhindered with a lower-ranked seat. The problem for us lies with the tournament's other competitors. Without protection, the Devilnay will simply use Shamad to immediately smite their opponents before they can even put up a proper fight." "But do you actually have the means to nullify that power?" Inyana asks. "You spoke of it as the most powerful technique of your kind. The fear of it was a strong motivator for all who dared oppose your coup of my father's throne." "I would not have survived this long without a counter," Cedrion says. He touches a finger to his breastplate, causing an ancient Yazatan sigil to illuminate on the worn armor. "Eidolon," he says. "We all wore this magical sigil on our armor to protect us from the power of Shamad during the Great Wars. Each of the competitors shall have this marking put upon them to prevent the Devilnay from stealing cheap victories." "Will that not also protect them against you?" Inyana asks. "I am not concerned with that," Cedrion says dismissively. "None of them are a threat to me." Inyana tries not to sneer, suppressing her true thoughts. Maybe now none of them are a threat, but by the end of the tournament, Hui will have gained enough power to wipe that smug look from your face permanently. Do we need to gather all of the competitors together now, or do we wait? Khazra asks. We will give them tonight, Cedrion replies. If they cannot be resourceful enough to survive a few more hours, their presence in the tournament will not be missed. Are you that confident that your pet human will survive? Inyana challenges. Are you worried that your brother is too weak to protect himself? Cedrion counters. I wish he was that easy to kill. Unfortunately, my brother is like a cockroach. And that resilience is what we require for entering the shrine of the Banu Kazka. The cooperation between Ymura and his vessel will be a determining factor in the battles to come. I do not believe any of the other competitors will be able to overcome that combination. Do not rule out the Grand General, Inyana replies. His pride and refusal to lose will become something that not even my brother can overcome. Cedrion grins. That too is an acceptable outcome. Either one of them winning still fits neatly into my plans. Ymura and Hui are like perfect counterparts for each other. Both are proud and capable warriors. Both are bound to human flesh. Yet while one has learned to work with his human host, the other has gained complete and total control of their union, leaving no room for dissent. Whichever of them does win, I still am victorious either way. Norx grins, licking his lips with anticipation. Go on, he says. Taint their water source, and we can be off. By tomorrow, those that have not already died will be weak and easy to finish. Radu nodded, his large hand surprisingly delicate as he uncorked the vial. He approached the spring cautiously, tilting the vial and allowing a few viscous drops to fall into the water. The surface shimmered momentarily, then stilled, the only evidence of their foul deed a subtle, almost imperceptible change in the water's color. Excellent, Norx murmured, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Now, let us retreat back into the shadows and watch our poison do its work. No, we can't let you go taking such shortcuts, a voice says from behind. Stealing the lives of the mortals also robs us of our fun. The Varkalax froze, their senses on high alert. The voice was smooth, cultured, with an undercurrent of amused contempt that sent a shiver down their spines. Norx whirled around, his eyes scanning the darkness, trying to pinpoint the source. Standing at the edge of the clearing, bathed in moonlight, was a figure that seemed to defy definition. He was tall and slender, dressed in impeccably tailored black clothes that seemed to absorb the light around him. His face was handsome, almost angelic, but his eyes burned with an ancient, malevolent intelligence. Norx recognized him instantly. Dekarabia, one of the devils. A fallen angel trapped in a human shell. A being of immense power and unfathomable cruelty. A growl built in Norx's chest, a primal warning. Devil, he snarled, his claws extending. This area has been claimed by the Varkalak. State your purpose. Dekarabia smiled, a slow, deliberate movement that revealed teeth a shade too sharp. You have staked out your own territory. Such quaint notions, but not unexpected from a wild beast. As if lines drawn on a map hold any meaning for higher beings such as myself. As for my purpose, I was simply enjoying a stroll, and happened to witness your rather clumsy attempt at sabotage. Sabotage? Norx scoffed, trying to regain his composure. We were merely testing the water's purity to see if it is safe to drink. Dekarabia tilted his head, his eyes glinting with amusement. Do not try to lie to the very originators of deceit. He stepped further into the clearing, his presence radiating an aura of power that pressed against the Varkalax like a physical weight. Dacian and Radu shifted nervously, their eyes darting between Norix and the devil. They knew they were outmatched. Devils were not to be trifled with. Norix knew it too, but he couldn't back down. Not now. Not in front of his pack.
And what if we were? What business is it yours, devil? This tournament is for those who seek the power of the Banu Kazka. We have as much of a right to be here as anyone else. And I will be claiming that prize by any means necessary. Instead of worrying about what we are doing, you should be worrying about your own upcoming matches. Now, stay out of our way, or become my prey.
Dekarabia chuckled, a low, melodious sound that was more unsettling than any roar. The Banu Kazka. It is indeed a tempting prize. But you misunderstand, Mutt King. I am not confined to any tournament rules. If I wished, I could seize your heart and crush it with but a simple twitch of my hand. He gestured towards the spring. Tell me, what did you hope to achieve with this little act? Eliminate your competition? Gain an advantage?
That is none of your concern,
North growled, his patience finally snapping. He lunged forward, his claws extended, aiming for Dekarabia's throat. Before he could reach him, Dekarabia moved. It was so fast that Norix barely registered it. One moment, the devil was standing there. The next, he was behind him, his hand resting lightly on Norix's shoulder. Such enthusiasm, Dekarabia purred, his voice a whisper in Norix's ear. But misplaced. You are strong, Varkalak King, but you lack subtlety. You act while others observe. You fight while others manipulate. A searing pain shot through Norix's shoulder like molten metal, coursing through his veins. He roared in agony, stumbling forward, his legs suddenly weak. He could feel his strength draining away, replaced by a chilling numbness. Each of us has a first-round fight with one of those humans. If you kill them, we'll have no one to take our frustrations out on. The devil grins, eyes flashing with malevolence. And then we will have to come back and find you.
You may be able to intimidate humans, but you do not scare me at all,
Norx growled, forcing himself to stand up against whatever dark pressure the devil was exerting on him.
If you were as strong as you try to come across as, then you would be wearing the skin of a Varkalak instead of a human. But I don't think you have what it takes to go one-on-one with an apex predator like me.
Dekarabia begins to laugh. We do not use dogs as vessels, because that is all you are, mongrel. Not one among you carries the spark necessary to be worthy of housing our brilliance. If we tried to occupy any of you mutts, your bodies would fall apart much too quickly. Do you get it yet, doggy? Kazadia asks with a mocking smile, walking up behind Dekarabia. You aren't worthy of being our condoms, let alone our complete vessels.
Why you?
Dacian growls, charging towards Kazadia, enraged. Norix turns his head towards Radu and quickly nods, sending the other Varkalak into battle. Dacian and Radu surged forward, their eyes filled with rage and fear. They knew they couldn't defeat the devils, but they couldn't abandon their king. Decarabia sighed, a sound of mock disappointment. Such loyalty. Admirable, but ultimately pointless. As the two Varkalax charge their foes, Khazdia throws both hands up and screams, a pulse of invisible power rippling outward, slamming into the Varkalax and propelling them back with such force that the jungle behind them is ripped up and sent flying. A massive trench stretches out before the devil as he slowly lowers his hands. Norks watched helplessly as his pack writhed on the ground, their bodies convulsing, their eyes wide with terror and pain. He tried to rise, to fight, but his limbs refused to obey. "You still serve a purpose," Decarabia tells the shaking Norix. "Your power will be carried through the tournament until it reaches me. I will not be robbed of a single drop of energy tomorrow." The devil grins, watching the proud Varkalak king, now completely humbled before him. Decarabia stepped over to him, his eyes filled with an unsettling mixture of pity and amusement. "A valuable lesson, Varkalak king, one you would do well to remember. In this tournament, power is not enough. You must also possess cunning, and above all, never underestimate your opponents." He leaned closer, his breath cold against Norix's ear. "Make sure you rest up. I want to be entertained tomorrow." The devil releases his paralysis, allowing the Varkalak relief. Norix collapsed to one knee as the paralysis released him, claws digging into the damp earth to keep himself upright. His body shook, not from weakness, but from the fury he dared not show. Around him, the remaining Varkalax drew back, their eyes averted, instinct screaming submission and survival in equal measure. Decarabia straightened and turned away, already bored. One by one, the other devils followed his lead, their footsteps light and unhurried, as if they were leaving a theater rather than the aftermath of the slaughter. Before vanishing into the shadows, Khazdia paused. His head tilted slightly, as if he had only just remembered something trivial. An afterthought, easily corrected. He turned back towards the spring and extended one hand. A lance of searing energy erupted from his palm and struck the water dead center. Water flashed into vapor in an instant, erupting upward in a violent column of white steam that roared through the clearing. The ground shuddered as the pool boiled away, liquid torn apart molecule by molecule until nothing remained but churning heat. A scalding wind blasted outward, flattening grass and stripping leaves from their branches, and forcing the Varkalax to shield their faces as the air itself burned in their lungs. In seconds, the spring was gone. Where clear water had once pooled, there was now only a blackened basin of cracked earth, its surface glassy and fused from the heat. The last traces of moisture hissed and vanished, carrying the poison with them, dispersed, diluted, and utterly destroyed. Khazida watched the steam rise for a heartbeat longer, the thin sneer curling his lips. Satisfied, he turned away without another glance and jogged off, his footsteps light as he disappeared into the jungle to rejoin the others. Laughter, soft, distant, and unmistakably cruel, echoed briefly through the trees before fading into the jungle night. The clearing felt larger without them, colder, empty. Norix remained where he was, breathing hard, his crown of authority stripped bare. The spring gurgled nearby, struggling to refill the void left by the devil's blast. It was a sound that acted as a mockery of all of his careful planning. Where once he had envisioned triumph, there was only absence. Ishef Drekovac tasted the humid night air of Jockey Island, finding it thick with the scent of salt, decaying vegetation, and something else. Something sweet and metallic that made his lips curl in a predatory smile. Death. It was everywhere. clinging to the gnarled trees, seeping from the volcanic earth, and carried on the whispers of the wind. He adjusted his high collar of his coat, the material doing little to alleviate the oppressive heat. Around him, the jungle pulsed with unseen life, the cacophony of insects and unseen creatures, a constant, unnerving hum. But Aisheth was not unnerved. He was at home. With a flick of his wrist, a skeletal bird materialized, its eyes burning with an eerie emerald light. Aisheth murmured a command, his voice a low raft that seemed to slither through the undergrowth. The bird took flight, disappearing into the dense canopy, a scout in the service of its morbid master. Aisheth began to walk, his boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. He moved with a grace that belied his hunched posture, his senses heightened, attuned to the subtle shifts in the island's energy. He could feel the lingering traces of the wards that concealed Jockey from the outside world, ancient magic woven into the very fabric of the island, a display of the power of the Fae who had forged this place, and the Yazitan weapon that lay at the heart of it. But he was not interested in the weapon. Angelic power held no allure for Aisheth. He sought something far more profound, something far more intimate. The skeletal bird returned, its image flickering momentarily before solidifying. It perched on Aisheth's outstretched hand, its sharp claws surprisingly gentle against his skin. In his mind, Aisheth received the images the bird had gleaned. A bestial creature impaled on a jagged rock, a reptilian humanoid drowned in a shallow pool of brackish water, another figure torn apart by some unseen beast, its identity no longer discernible. They had all failed to survive, but they all held potential for one such as Aisheth. Good, Aisheth crooned, his voice a silken caress. He dismissed the bird with another flick of his wrist and changed direction, heading towards the location of the nearest corpse. The air grew heavier as he approached, the stench of decay intensifying. He found the first body at the base of a towering banyan tree, its roots like grasping claws sinking into the earth. It was a young woman, barely more than a girl, dressed in the tattered remains of what might have been once fine leather armor. Her face was frozen in a mask of terror, her eyes wide and vacant. A crude spear protruded from her chest. Aisheth knelt beside her, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. He could feel the lingering spark of her life force, a faint echo of the power she had once possessed. He could tell immediately that despite her appearance, she was not a human girl. This was a succubus. This was a creature that hunted with deceptive tactics, luring unsuspecting human men into her striking range. But these tactics were not going to be enough for a competition as deadly as Inyana's tournament. Such a waste, he murmured, his voice laced with genuine regret. So much potential squandered. Kneeling beside the succubus's corpse, Aisheth began to hum. The chant was not melodic, not in any conventional sense. It was a dissonant, haunting tune, a lament for the departed, a siren song for the dead. The air around Aisheth shimmered, the shadows deepening, twisting into grotesque shapes. The very earth seemed to vibrate in response to the unholy melody. The girl's body began to twitch. Her eyes flickered, the vacant stare replaced by a glimmer of something else. A faint, ethereal glow emanated from the wound in her chest, spreading outwards, illuminating her pallid skin. She gasped, a rattling, gurgling sound that echoed through the jungle. Her limbs jerked spasmodically, as if she were fighting against some unseen force. Then, slowly, agonizingly, she began to rise. The girl stood before him, no longer alive, but not entirely dead either. She was something in between, a puppet animated by his will, a vessel for his power. No longer in full control of her own mind or body, the creature's mask began to slip, and long fangs became visible where once there were human-looking teeth. Fingernails had reverted back into blade-like claws. The pallor of her skin had become more of an ashy gray than human-toned.
"Welcome back to this world,"
Aisheth whispered, his voice filled with a chilling affection.
"You have a new purpose now. You will serve me until the day that I allow your bones back into the earth to rest."
He turned his attention to the other corpses, his skeletal bird guiding him through the darkness. One by one he raised them, adding them to his growing legion. Each one a failure in life, but now in death they would serve him. He found a large ogre, his muscles still taut even in death, and reanimated him as a lumbering, unstoppable guardian. He paused, closing his eyes and extending his senses. A subtle hum resonated within him, a byproduct of the dark magic that coursed through his veins. It was a divining rod of sorts, guiding him toward the lingering echoes of death. He could feel them, faint whispers in the symphony of the island, remnants of those who had fallen prey to his dangers. Aisheth moved again, drawn by the promise of fresh corpses. The forest floor was littered with the debris of brutal battles, shattered trees, scorched earth, and the occasional discarded weapon. The air grew colder as he neared his destination, a sign that death was abundant here. He found a Varkalak crumpled near a rock face, its limbs torn and chest caved in, yet its fanged mouth still frozen in defiance. Beside it another, a female, lay sprawled and burned beyond being easily identifiable. Power coiled around his arms, threads of necrotic energy snapping like cords of fire. The ground beneath them cracked open. Claws flexed and eyes opened. The Varkalaks rose, not howling, not snarling, but with an eerie calm, their bodies controlled by an intelligence that was no longer their own. Not slaves, not mindless, but instruments, tools. Aisheth staggered slightly as the magic surged through him, exhilarating and draining all at once. The skeletal bird shrieked from above, and his eyes were drawn eastward, towards the water. There, half submerged in a flooded grove, he found a naga, draped across the rocks in coils of shining iridescent scale. Her wounds were deep, her blood diluted in the water around her, but the elegance of her death had not faded. A spear was thrust through her abdomen, pinning her to the pool's edge like a specimen on display. Aisheth removed it without hesitation. He whispered to the depths, calling on his patron god of death, Thanatos. The Naga's eyes fluttered open, silver pupils dilated and twitching. Her tongue flicked from her lips. Her arms moved slowly, joints popping until she slithered upright, silent, deadly, and loyal. She did not bow. She did not need to. But Aisheth could feel the bond, and that was enough. Nearby, he found several demons, likely the cause of death for many of the other monsters found in the area. Their bodies were strewn around the far edge of the clearing, curled and twisted like tortured sculptures, horns shattered, wings torn, and ichor seeping into the ground. At least 6 of them, their forms mangled by whatever power had struck them down, but their essence remained. Demons didn't die easily. Whatever had killed them was exceptionally strong. Aisheth called to the pieces of them that still lingered, the hatred, the fury, and the pride. When the air turned thick and metallic, when the jungle animals fled in panicked silence, he knew they were listening. One by one, the demons stirred, their eyes reignited, hollow and flickering, their joints bent backward as they stood, wings unfurled, bone protruding through ragged flesh. Their mouths opened in silent roars, No longer proud, no longer wild. Like all the others, no amount of power they had in life mattered when trying to resist the necromancer's control. They were completely bound to his will. The senses granted him by Thanatos for his dedicated service keyed him in to the knowledge that something far more valuable than Varkalax or demons lay nearby. And so the Dark Sorcerer continued his search. He found his quarry in a small clearing, bathed in an eerie ethereal glow. Here the earth was churned and stained a deep crimson. The remnants of some terrible struggle were evident, a story told in claw marks and broken bones. And in the center of it all lay more corpses. There, in the carnage, he found a creature of nightmare, a hulking mass of muscle and fur that could only be described as a minotaur. Its bull head was twisted at an unnatural angle, and one of its massive horns was snapped cleanly off. Clearly, it had been a formidable opponent in life, but now it was simply raw material. Aisheth knelt beside the beast, his long skeletal fingers tracing the line of a deep gash across its chest. A mindless creature, not cut out for the complex strategies of this competition, he murmured, his voice a low rasp that seemed to carry on the wind. But you will do well as part of my army. He began the ritual, chanting in a guttural tone that seemed to vibrate the very air around him. Black energy coiled from his fingertips, sinking into the Minotaur's flesh. The air crackled with power, and the ground beneath them trembled. Slowly, the beast began to twitch. Its ruined eye snapped open, glowing with an unholy light. It rose to its feet, a shambling mockery of its former self, and turned its gaze upon Aisheth. Arise and serve, Aisheth commanded, his voice laced with power. The bull-headed creature grunted, a sound of pure animalistic obedience, and bowed its massive head. Satisfied, Aisheth turned his attention to the other corpses. There was a grotesque, serpentine creature with scales like obsidian and fangs dripping with venom, a Bakunawa, likely lured here by the promise of power only to find its end. Nearby lay a shattered mass of feathers and bone, the remnants of some creature of which Aisheth did not know. Its body was far too mangled to be a candidate for revival. He did not have the time to stitch the creature back together, and reviving it in pieces would do him no good. And so he passed, collecting what he could. One by one, Aisheth resurrected them. Each ritual was a violation of the natural order, a twisting of life into something unnatural and abhorrent. But Aisheth cared little for the sanctity of life. He sought only power, and these undead servants were a means to that end. By the time he was finished, Aisheth had amassed a formidable retinue, a small army of the damned. He surveyed his handiwork with a cold, calculating gaze. They were not mindless automatons, not entirely. A spark of their former selves remained, twisted and corrupted by his magic, making them all the more dangerous. He raised his hand, and the undead creatures fell into formation behind him. The Minotaur lumbered forward, its hooves pounding the earth. The Naga slithered silently, its forked tongue tasting the air. The Varkalax hung back, crouched low and snarling. The demon stood in a line, intimidating and powerful. Now, Aisheth said, a cruel smile twisting his lips, let us see what other treasures this island holds. He led his army deeper into the jungle, his senses alert for any sign of danger or opportunity. He knew that the other competitors would be preparing for the tournament, honing their skills and gathering their strength. But he had a secret weapon, an advantage that none of them could match, for he had death on his side. As the night wore on, Aisheth's army grew. a silent, shambling horde that moved through the jungle like a plague. He felt their pain, their resentment, their utter lack of will, and it was intoxicating. He did not know what the other competitors were doing, huddled in their camps, sharpening their blades and whispering prayers to whatever gods they clung to. But he did not care. Let them prepare for their battles. Let them dream of glory and victory, for he had already won. For even on Jockey Island, death was Isheth Drakovok's domain, and tonight he was its god. The tournament was a mere distraction, a stage for his grand performance. The weapon, the prize, they meant nothing to him. He sought only to expand his dominion, to weave the fallen into his tapestry of death. And as the first rays of dawn kissed the horizon, Isheth knew that his work had only just begun. The tournament was about to start, and there would be more bodies to add to his collection. "Yoo-hoo, Broken Hill!" Coyote's voice rang out. Broko looked around, finding Coyote's face formed out of stones lying on the ground nearby. He is surprised to see the trickster coming out on his own, without being called. As if reading Brokil's mind, Coyote speaks again. "We are not at your beck and call, shaman. I can come and go in this world as I please." "What is so important to bring you back here before the tournament has even begun?" "I don't think I like your tone, Broken Hill. Are you annoyed by me? Should I not be lending you my assistance? Should I just return you to the dust of the earth?" "It is not like that," Brokil says, trying to remain calm and not play into Coyote's game. "I am just waiting to hear your valuable wisdom." Coyote snickers. "You're no fun. Anyways, I just thought you might like to know that the odds of the Werewolf King winning in the first round have dropped significantly." "Something has happened?" Brokil asks, caught by surprise. He did not expect the news to be something like this. "The king and his jesters got caught with their paws in the cookie jar. Apparently, the devils happened upon them trying to poison the water source that the human mages have been using. Let's just say that it didn't go very well for the king." "Was he killed?" "No, but the devils left him wetting himself all alone. He is a wolf without a pack, a king without a kingdom, a warrior who has lost both his confidence and his resolve. I do not foresee him making a significant recovery in time before his match in the tournament comes around." "So, Hui will most likely be the one moving on to the second round." "That in of itself is not a big surprise. He is Inyana's favorite combatant." "The favorite can always be upset," Coyote says. "But, in this case, I do think that the king will be toppled by the general, and be joining the great ancestors in the morning. I would strongly suggest that you watch Hui's matches very carefully, and learn whatever patterns or weaknesses he might have." Before Broko can respond, the stones shudder and begin to shift. The grin carved into Coyote's stony face fractures first, pebbles tumbling loose as the laughter itself is crumbling away. The eyes linger a moment longer, hollow and knowing, then collapse inward, the stones clattering back into a remarkable scatter on the ground. The air feels suddenly emptier. Brokil exhales slowly, only now realizing how tightly he had been holding himself together. The night presses in around him again, crickets chirping and distant waves breaking against the island's shore. The tournament grounds humming with unrestrained power and expectation. Coyote is gone, but the trickster's presence lingers like a bad joke that cannot quite be shaken. He turns away, his expression hardening in his mind as he shifts from spirits to strategy. If the Werewolf King truly was broken, then the balance of the tournament has already shifted, and Hui, and Giannis Chosen, would be the storm everyone else would have to weather. As Brokel walks back towards the lights and distant sounds of the competitors' camps, one last stone rolls across the ground on its own, coming to rest at his heel. From nowhere and everywhere at once, Coyote's laughter echoes softly. Brokel does not turn around. A king without a kingdom, or a shaman without a tribe, Brokel whispers. You and I are not so different, but where you have lost your will to fight, my resolve is only strengthened that much more. I will be the one who wins this tournament. I swear that vow before all of the great ancestors. The being known as Tradik Bondschrift had not been in a state of full consciousness in over 800 years. Even in those days, the presence of the Fae was already fading. They had been hunted for millennia, forced into hiding in out of the way places and in the deepest of caves. The Yazid had been relentless in their pursuit, destroying their sacred places and cutting them off from the energy that sustained them. But the Yazito were not alone. They had created hunters designed specifically to track down and kill the Fae. The Fae had tried to fight back, but they were not warriors, and most were felled with little effort. It was during these desperate times that the Fae began to infuse their energy into the elemental forces of the earth to create protectors. From the air, the Fae created the Sylphs to carry whispers across the world and to guide the migration of the birds, to soften storms before they broke villages, and to keep the breath of the sky in balance between tempest and stillness. They infused the wind with awareness so it could listen, not just move. From the fire, the Fae created the Ifrits, to temper destruction with purpose, to ensure flame cleared not without devouring renewal, to guard the sacred earth and the molten heart of the mountains. They gave fire discernment, so it would burn with intention rather than blind hunger. From the waters, the Fae created the Undines, to shepherd the tides, to cradle rivers within their banks, to remember what was drowned and what was born along every shore. They taught the sea patience, so it would erode stone without erasing life. From the earth, the Fae created the gnomes to steady tectonic fury, to nurture the roots in darkness, to hold mountains upright and metals in quiet slumber until called upon. They gifted stone with endurance that could protect as well as endure. From the lightning, they drew forth the Fulgari, to split the sky at necessary moments, to reset stagnant air, to strike where imbalance festered. They shaped the storm's fury into a scalpel instead of a catastrophe. From shadowed dusk, they formed the umbrals to guard thresholds between light and night, to ensure darkness remained rest rather than oblivion. And from the light itself, they kindled the luminance to mend what the others could not, weaving renewal back into the soil, sea, sky, and flame. Tradik had been among the forces that fought to protect Jockey Island, after the Yazita descended upon them. The 4th wing of the 11th Choir, under the command of Captain Corial, was tasked to eliminate the remaining Fae that were in hiding on the island. The elementals battled the Yazita fiercely, surprising Corial. Many Yazita died in the battle, something unheard of for ages. Captain Corial was impressed by the power of the elementals and the protective magics placed upon the island. Rather than lose more of his soldiers, Corial made a petition to General Mikhail for a truce. The Yazita would allow the Fae this one refuge, and in return they would protect the Banu Kazka from all outside forces. With their combined magic, both the island and the shrine housing the Banu Kazka would be hidden, and would remain nothing more than an ancient myth, forgotten to nearly everyone. Tradik had been forced to awaken by a persistent whisper in his dormant mind. The island was again under attack. Hundreds of monsters had come to Jockey, bringing with them slaughter and malice. The island's energy was thrown into chaos, unbalanced by the swelling evil. The Fae that remained were too weakened to do little more than rouse their ancient protectors. The elementals stirred, but even their great power was not enough to crush the invaders and stop their attack. Of all of the Fae's creations on Jockey, Tradic alone remained. The Ifrit's fire had consumed many creatures, growing ever stronger for it. The invaders had cast a deep spell over the island that granted the power of the slain to their killers, and even the Ifrit benefited from it. While not technically alive, the sealed demon did not discriminate. The elemental was not excluded from the magic, and through circumstances unforeseen by Cedrian or Inyana, this lone Ifrit had managed to survive the battle royal and make it to the tournament. In the morning, all would be tested. The participants would clash in battles to the death, the victor gaining even greater power. Tradic would do as he was created to do. He would destroy all who were a threat to the island, the Fae, and the sacred resting place of the Banu Casca. Tradic did not sleep. Sleep was for mortals, for beings of flesh and blood that required rest and sustenance, to replace their dwindling energies. He was an Ifrit, a creature of fire and will, and he could function at the same capacity without having to worry about any limitations, such as stamina or endurance. So long as his body was able to move, he would continue to fight. The other contestants, the fragile, the weak, they huddled around their meager fires, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames, a pathetic imitation of the inferno that raged within him. They sought warmth, comfort, and a fleeting respite from the unknown terrors that lurked within the island's shadowed depths. But Tradic needed none of it. He closed his eyes, drawing upon the magical connection he had been forged from. Jockey Island thrummed with Fae energy, a symphony of unseen forces that resonated deep within his elemental core. The air itself crackled with latent power, a potent brew that invigorated him, sharpening his senses and fueled the flames that danced beneath his obsidian skin. The Fae energy that coursed through the island permeated every rock, every tree, every grain of sand. It was an energy that mortals could barely perceive, a subtle undercurrent that influenced their thoughts and emotions. He could sense their fear, their anxiety, their desperate attempts to shield themselves from the unknown. He could feel the flicker of their life forces, the fragile sparks that threatened to be extinguished by the island's overwhelming power. They were like moths drawn to a flame, lured to Jockey Island by the promise of the Yazata's weapon, unaware of the true cost of their ambition. Tradic scoffed inwardly. They sought power. They craved the strength to dominate, to control, to impose their will upon the world. But they did not understand the true nature of power. They did not grasp the responsibility that came with wielding such a force. He opened his eyes, and waves of heat rose from his body. The earth beneath his feet turned to flame. He began to walk, his footsteps leaving trails of embers upon the rocky ground. He moved with a purpose, a sense of direction that defied the labyrinthine paths of the island. He was not merely wandering, he was seeking. He sought out the heart of the island, the nexus point where the Fae energy converged, the place where the veil between worlds was thinnest. He alone knew that such a place existed, the hidden sanctuary where the Fae had once walked, where their very presence of magic still lingered in the air. The Fae had all been but wiped out by the Yazata long ago, but at one time they had beautiful shining altars. The ancient humans and the animal progenitors, the Vitir spirits, had erected the altars to worship the benevolent Fae. This was the crime that brought the wrath of the Yazata upon them. No one was allowed to offer prayer or devotion to any but the Creator of all things. The Yazata felt that the Fae were taking credit for acts and powers that did not belong to them. In truth, the Fae did not ask for the worship. The Fae of this island had remained loyal to the Creator, yet that was not enough to protect them from the zealous blades of Vanicon and his bloodthirsty 11th Choir. He found it in a grove of ancient trees, their gnarled branches reaching towards the heavens like supplicating arms. The air here was thick with energy, a palpable hum that resonated within his entire body. The ground beneath his feet was soft and yielding, covered in a carpet of moss that glowed with an ethereal light. In the center of the grove stood a stone altar, its surface etched with symbols that predated human civilization. It was a place of power, a conduit to the unseen realms. Tradic could feel the Fae's presence here, their lingering essence clinging to the very stones. He approached the altar, his movements slow and deliberate. He reached out a hand, his fingers tracing the ancient symbols. He understood the true nature of the tournament, the true stakes involved. It was not merely a competition for power. It was a test of character, a trial by fire that would determine the future of not only the mortal realm, but even the divine. He was likely the only being on Jockey aside from Cedrion that fully understood this truth. Those competing in the tournament were blinded by their ambition and did not care to step back and contemplate the why. Why would a divine being such as this Yazata Cedrion willingly leave the fate of a weapon as powerful as the Banu Casca up to chance? Why would he give the opportunity of wielding such a weapon to creatures as dangerous and evil as those in attendance? There was no chance involved in the eyes of the Yazata. Cedrion knew exactly what he was doing. He was preparing who he already believed would win. The others, the humans, the monsters, even the fallen of his own kind, were nothing more than sacrifices. Cedrion intended to sacrifice every single other being on the entire island to his champion, so that they alone would be strong enough to break the seal on the Banu Casca's shrine and overcome the challenges it kept hidden. He looked up at the sky, the stars now beginning to fade as the first hint of dawn painted the horizon. The night was coming to an end. The tournament was about to begin. As he emerged from the grove, he saw the other contestants stirring in their camps, their faces etched with anticipation and trepidation. They were preparing for battle, honing their skills, bracing themselves for the challenges ahead. Tradic watched them and wondered if they knew that most of them would not survive the day. They would die, and the Banu Casca would be taken by force. When that happened, Jockey Island itself would be left to ruin. Tradic did not care whether the mortals lived or died, for all that mattered to him was his sacred duty to protect the island. The Fae had created him and the others long ago for that very purpose. Now, as he was the only elemental conjurer remaining, that burden was his alone to carry. The Banu Casca would not be claimed. Tradic would make sure that he stood victorious over the other competitors, and the cursed blade would remain within its shrine where it belonged. Jockey Island would be restored to the natural order. The landscape and wildlife that had been ravaged by the battles that took place already would need time to recover. The frail Fae presence would be slow to heal, but heal it would. Once all of the fighting was over and no one was left on Jockey but the Fae, the island would recover. He did not seek out the other contestants. He did not engage in any pre-tournament posturing or displays of power. He remained aloof, a solitary figure focused on his own preparations. He knew that they underestimated him, but Tradic was not merely a creature of fire. He had been around since before mankind fashioned tools from stone, and he had seen countless wars and many cycles of creation and destruction. Of all of the competitors, he alone knew the island intimately. He understood the flow of its energy, the secrets of its magic, the weaknesses of its defenses. He would use this knowledge to his advantage, turning the island itself into a weapon against his opponents. As the sun finally broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, Tradic stood ready.